You know that feeling when your own family betrays you, right to your face, and then backs up your abuser? That's exactly what happened to me on my birthday. I just smiled, but inside, a quiet storm was brewing, and by the next morning, my niece woke up to a shocking discovery. It all started innocently enough. We'd had our share of petty arguments, my niece Sophie and I little eye rolls at family gatherings, snarky comments she thought were clever. Annoying, sure, but nothing that gave her the right to do what she did that night. It wasn't just what she said or how she said it. It was the fact that she'd done it deliberately, in front of everyone, and then acted like it was nothing. What made it worse? Her father, my brother-in-law, just sat there. He saw the whole thing and didn't say a single word. Not even a half-hearted, "That's not appropriate." He just stared down at his plate like it wasn't his problem. And the rest of my family, my mom included, seemed completely lost, like they'd forgotten basic human decency. The evening had started so normally. I'd invited them over for my birthday dinner, determined to keep it small and avoid the usual chaos that happens when too many people gather. I'd spent the whole day cooking, setting the table, making sure everything felt welcoming. I'd even treated myself to a new outfit, a beautiful cream blouse with a soft sheen and a deep green skirt that made me feel put together. I planned for this night to feel like a small, peaceful celebration, just for us. Sophie had been quiet most of the meal, fiddling with her phone while the adults talked. About halfway through, she got up to refill her glass with the punch I'd made. I wasn't even paying attention to her until I felt the cold, sticky splash hit me. The dark red liquid instantly soaked my new blouse and skirt, dripping onto the floor, splattering against the chair. For a second, a fleeting second, I thought it might have been clumsiness. But then I looked up. She was standing there, holding her empty glass, staring me dead in the eye. And then she said it, loud, clear, and with a sickening smile. "Now you look as cheap as you really are." Silence. Not shock silence. No. More like that awkward pause when everyone's waiting for someone else to handle it. I waited for my sister, Claire, to tell her daughter to apologize. Claire didn't say anything. My mom, my own mother, broke the moment by shaking her head and saying, "Oh, Stephanie, it's just a little prank. Don't overreact." That was when something in me shifted. I'd had my fair share of humiliations in this family, but this one was going to stick unless I did something about it. I excused myself, smiling like it didn't matter, but inside, my mind was already racing, working out the details. I knew I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to throw a drink back at her or start a public fight. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be quiet, deliberate, and timed just right. The kind that leaves a mark without anyone seeing it coming. This birthday wasn't going to end with candles and cake. It was going to end with a lesson Sophie wouldn't forget. When I came back to the table after cleaning myself up as best I could, the room felt heavier. Nobody looked directly at me, but I could feel their eyes shift every time I moved. I sat down like nothing had happened, calmly refilled my glass, and rejoined the conversation as if my clothes weren't still damp and smelling faintly of punch. They probably thought I'd just let it go, the way I always had. That was their mistake. Sophie didn't meet my gaze. She kept fiddling with her phone, occasionally smirking like she'd won something. Claire was talking about some work project, and my mom chimed in here and there, trying desperately to keep the evening moving along. I laughed when they laughed, nodded when they spoke, giving no sign that I was even thinking about the incident. But I was. By the time dessert was served, my plan was fully formed. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. My revenge wasn't going to be a single, explosive moment. It was going to be quiet, precise, and deeply inconvenient. When the night ended, they all left without a hint of tension in their voices. Maybe they thought the joke had blown over. That suited me just fine. I locked the door behind them, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat down at my laptop. Claire had once asked me to order something for her online when she was overseas. She'd given me her credit card information over the phone, and I'd saved it. She never changed the card afterward. Over the years, she'd probably forgotten I even had it. I logged into her account. There it was, active, with a balance big enough to cover the shopping spree Sophie had been bragging about for weeks. I clicked a few buttons, filled in the required reason, and cancelled it completely. Not frozen, not paused. Gone. That was step one. Small, almost invisible, but enough to create a ripple. I didn't need her to connect it to me right away. In fact, I preferred if she didn't. Confusion was just as satisfying as anger. But the real blow wasn't going to be about money. See, Sophie's car, the one she flaunted on Instagram, the one she used to drive her friends around, wasn't technically hers. It was mine. My name was on the title. I'd bought it 2 years ago when Claire's finances were a mess. Under the agreement, they'd pay me back slowly. They never did, but they acted like the car was Sophie's by right. The keys were in my kitchen drawer. I had a friend with a secure garage on the other side of town. That night, I placed the keys in my bag and went to bed with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow morning, Sophie was going to learn something her mother had never taught her. Some people don't play by your rules. I woke up early the next morning, earlier than I usually did on weekends. The house was quiet, and the air still carried that faint, smug energy from last night. I made coffee, set my mug on the counter, and picked up my bag. The car keys were inside, exactly where I'd placed them. Sophie's weekend routine was predictable. She never got out of bed before 9 o'clock unless she had something exciting to do. That gave me more than enough time. I slipped outside, unlocked her precious little car, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior still smelled faintly of her perfume, that overly sweet kind teenagers think makes them sophisticated. The streets were empty. I drove across town to my friend Mark's place, a secure garage behind his workshop. Mark didn't ask why I was there before sunrise. He just watched me pull in, listened to me say, "Keep it here for a while," and nodded. That's one thing I like about Mark. He doesn't pry. By 8:40 a.m., I was back home, sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee and a clear view of the driveway. Right on cue, Sophie came outside, hoodie, messy bun, keys in hand. She stopped short. Her head snapped around one way, then the other. She walked to the curb, looked up and down the street, even glanced at the neighbors' driveways. Then the pacing started, phone out. A few minutes of frantic talking. I didn't need to hear her voice to picture the tone. Half panic, half outrage. Not long after, Claire's car screeched into the driveway. She got out, already talking at Sophie, waving her arms, scanning the street like she expected the car to magically appear if she looked hard enough. They both got in Claire's car and left quickly. I imagined them heading straight to the police station, Sophie insisting it was stolen, Claire demanding urgency, the officer calmly explaining the process, knowing full well most stolen cars are just misplaced or towed. By midday, Claire called me. She didn't ask if I'd seen anything. She went straight into complaining about how unsafe my neighborhood had become, how kids can't have anything nice anymore, and how the police don't do their jobs. I made the right noises, sympathetic but detached, and let her vent without offering help. Because help wasn't coming. Not from me. The car was safe, tucked away, and staying right where it was. This wasn't about destroying it or even keeping it forever. This was about removing something they assumed they were entitled to, making them live without it, feel the weight of the absence. And the best part? They still didn't have the faintest clue it was me. By the second day, the tone of Claire's calls had changed. The panic was still there, but it had curdled into something sharper, anger. Sophie wasn't just upset anymore. She was furious. Losing the car meant she'd miss a lunch she'd been bragging about for weeks, skipped her part-time job, and now Claire refused to let her borrow her own car, afraid Sophie would lose that one too. I pictured Sophie sulking in her room, door slammed, phone buzzing with unanswered messages from friends who'd moved on without her. That alone was satisfying. But then an unexpected problem landed right in my lap. Claire called mid-morning, sounding stressed, but trying to act casual. She said she had an urgent bill to pay, but her account had been temporarily frozen because of fraud activity linked to her now-cancelled credit card. She didn't directly ask for money at first. She circled around it, mentioning how she was short this month and still waiting on the bank. But eventually, the ask came. I told her I'd look into it and ended the call without committing. Knowing they were now scrambling for cash while having no clue I'd caused it, that was more satisfying than anything I'd originally planned. Later that afternoon, I ran to the grocery store. In the cereal aisle, I nearly bumped into Sophie. She was with two of her friends, chatting and laughing until she saw me. Her entire face just fell instantly. I didn't greet her, didn't even slow down. I just walked past like she was a stranger. But as I turned into the next aisle, I caught her voice, low and fast, telling her friends something that made them both look at me. One of them even stared a little too long, like they'd just heard something they weren't sure they should believe. By evening, the situation had shifted again. Claire called, but this time her tone was different, sharper, cautious. She started asking if I'd noticed anyone hanging around my street lately, if I'd had packages go missing, if maybe my doorbell camera had caught something. She didn't accuse me directly, but I could tell she was dancing around it. She wanted to see if I'd slip. The bigger twist came later that night when my mom called. She said Claire had mentioned that someone in the family might be responsible for what happened. She didn't say my name, but I could tell she was probing, waiting for my reaction. I kept my voice even, told her I hoped they found the car soon, and added that maybe it was just abandoned somewhere waiting to be picked up. The thing about suspicion in families, it doesn't just sit quietly. It grows, it spreads, and it turns people against each other faster than the truth ever could. I hadn't planned for them to start doubting each other so soon, but now that it was happening, I wasn't about to stop it. I just had to keep quiet, keep calm, and watch as the cracks widened, and they would widen. I was sure of it. By the third day, I didn't need to see Claire and Sophie to know things were falling apart. I could hear it in the clipped tone of Claire's voice whenever she called, and in the muffled shouting in the background. Whatever polite front they tried to keep up at first, it had absolutely crumbled. From what Claire let slip, she'd started pressing Sophie about whether she might have let someone drive the car or done something careless that led to it disappearing. Sophie swore she hadn't, but Claire kept cycling back, clearly not convinced. The missing car was bad enough, but when you added the frozen credit card on top of it, and Sophie's reputation for being careless with her things, the suspicion was practically gift-wrapped. Midday, I got a text from Claire that stopped me cold for a second. It said, "If I find out you're hiding something about the car, I'm not bailing you out of it." I knew instantly it wasn't meant for me. She'd sent it to the wrong number. I didn't respond. I just let it sit there, like a tiny little bomb, knowing she'd eventually notice the mistake and wonder if I'd read into it. A couple of hours later, a mutual friend called to tell me about a scene in their driveway. Sophie had been yelling at Claire so loudly that neighbors came outside to watch. Sophie accused her of always blaming her when things went wrong, while Claire fired back that Sophie was selfish and careless, and this was just another example. It ended with Sophie storming into the house and slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows, leaving Claire standing alone in the driveway, hands on her hips, staring at nothing. That evening, my mom called for the second time in 2 days, her tone noticeably cooler. She said Claire had hinted again that someone in the family might be behind the missing car. Mom didn't outright accuse me, but I could tell she was testing the waters. I kept my voice steady, told her it would be terrible if that were true, and even added that I'd keep my eyes open in case I spotted the car nearby. She seemed satisfied enough to end the call, but I could feel the suspicion still simmering under the surface. The best part? Knowing they had no idea the car was sitting untouched in Mark's locked garage. I checked on it that afternoon. It was spotless, full tank of gas, exactly the way Sophie had last left it. The only difference was that she couldn't touch it. When I first came up with the plan, I thought I'd keep the car for a week. That seemed long enough to make a point. But now, watching them crack apart faster than I'd imagined, I was starting to think a week might be generous. If they were already this shaken after 3 days, I wanted to see what another week would do. By the 5th day, Claire and Sophie weren't even pretending to be civil anymore. What started as arguments about the missing car had turned into full-blown shouting matches about everything they'd been storing up for years. I heard from a neighbor that Sophie had accused Claire of ruining her life and never trusting her, while Claire fired back that Sophie didn't appreciate anything and acted like the world owed her. The car wasn't the problem anymore. It was just the match that had set fire to years of deep resentment. I could have ended it right then. I had the keys. I could have driven the car back, called Claire, and played the hero. But there was something deeply satisfying about letting them twist in that uncertainty. They were both so sure the world had wronged them, yet neither could say exactly how. By the 7th morning, I decided it was time. The damage was done, and stretching it out any longer might make them suspicious in the wrong way. I got up before the sun, grabbed the keys, and drove the car back. I didn't put it in their driveway. That would have been too obvious, too direct. Instead, I parked it 2 streets over, in front of an empty rental house. I locked the doors, slid the keys under the driver's seat, and walked away without looking back. Just after noon, Claire texted me. The car turned up. No damage. Police don't know who had it. A second later, another message. Weirdest thing that's ever happened. I stared at the screen for a long moment, a slow smile spreading across my face, then put the phone down without replying. 2 hours later, Sophie posted a photo online. She was sitting on the hood of the car, grinning, with the caption, "Guess who's back?" No apology, no acknowledgement, just an attempt to slip right back into her old life. But I knew better. They'd felt it. The loss, the inconvenience, the uncertainty. It had done its work. They'd learned in their own way that things could disappear without warning, and that sometimes there is no one to blame but themselves. I never admitted anything, and I never will. I don't need to. The best part about quiet revenge is that it leaves no proof, just a lingering shadow of suspicion. And now that shadow will always be there for them, because the next time Sophie mouths off or Claire dismisses me, they'll remember this week. They'll remember how quickly comfort can vanish. And they'll wonder, just for a second, if I'm the one holding the keys again. That doubt, that pause before they act, is worth more than any shouted argument or dramatic confrontation. And for me, that was the real gift I gave myself on my birthday. Update! It had been 3 weeks since the birthday incident, and life had settled into something resembling normal. I still saw Sophie's car around town, and every time I did, there was a small, private satisfaction in knowing I'd once made it vanish. The calls from Claire had quieted. Mom had stopped fishing for answers. For all appearances, everything was back to the way it had been before. Or so I thought. One Saturday morning, I was making coffee when my phone rang. Claire's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't in the mood for whatever passive-aggressive comments she might have saved up, but curiosity won. She didn't waste time. "We're coming by. Be home." No explanation, no hint of her mood, just an instruction. I considered saying no, but something in her voice wasn't the usual clipped, impatient tone. It was softer, almost cautious. Against my better judgment, I said, "Fine." An hour later, I saw them pull into my driveway. Both of them got out of the car. Sophie wasn't scrolling on her phone for once. She had her hands tucked into the sleeves of her hoodie and was looking down at the ground. Claire, instead of her usual air of superiority, looked careful, like she was approaching a situation she didn't want to mess up. They came to the door together, and the first thing I noticed was that Sophie was holding a small bouquet of fresh flowers. She handed them to me without a word at first, then gave a faint, almost shy smile and said they were just because. Claire followed with a medium-sized gift bag, wrapped neatly in gold paper and tied with a ribbon. She set it on my dining table and told me to open it. Inside was a leather tote bag. Not just any tote bag, but the exact one I'd once stopped to admire in a store window nearly a year ago. I'd never told them that, but Claire must have remembered the day. It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't something I'd ever expect her to buy for me. Then came the part one really didn't see coming. They both apologized. Not the vague, half-hearted kind where someone says, "Sorry you felt that way." This was different. Claire admitted outright that she'd been wrong to dismiss what happened at my birthday as a prank. She said she should have defended me and that she regretted not stepping in. Sophie, to my surprise, didn't try to hide behind sarcasm. She said her comment at dinner was cruel, and she'd been thinking about it since. She even admitted that losing the car, though she still didn't know how it had happened, had made her realize how quickly things could be taken away. She said she'd been embarrassed, angry, and then eventually just thoughtful about the whole thing. I stood there listening, not saying much. Part of me wanted to believe them. Part of me wanted to think that maybe something had shifted in them during those chaotic days. But another part of me, the part that had lived through years of subtle digs and dismissals, was on guard. People can change, yes, but they can also perform change when it suits them. So I thanked them. I accepted the flowers, the gift, the apology. I even told them it meant a lot to hear them say those things. And in that moment, I meant it, because forgiveness, at least for now, felt easier than carrying the weight of resentment. But trust? That would take longer. I've learned not to hold grudges for the sake of holding them. But I've also learned that keeping your guard up is sometimes just as important as letting things go. So, for now, I'll see where this goes. Maybe it's a turning point. Maybe it's just a temporary performance. Either way, I'll keep the bag, enjoy the flowers while they last, and remember that if things ever go back to the way they were, it's not hard to take the keys.